According to research published at Cornell University, the majority of the population is too stupid to allow democracy to flourish. The argument is that people, or at least a majority, are incompetent and thus unable to select a candidate that would be the most competent person for the job. The research led by David Dunning says that if people don't have specific knowledge on a particular subject, they're unable to identify a candidate who is an expert on it. It says that even if a person has facts or even just information about a candidate, they still have no ability to evaluate him properly. Adding to the study, he says, very smart ideas are going to be hard for people to adopt because most people don't have the sophistication to recognize how good an idea is. The author David Dunning, along with Justin Kruger, who has left Cornell and is now with the New York University, show evidence that the people are self-delusional when assessing their own skills. They believe that they are more knowledgeable than they actually are. Tests given to such people who have a high opinion of their knowledge showed they actually scored very low on tests. People who judged themselves to be above average were actually scoring at the very lowest. In another test, they had people grade each other's grammar skill exams. The people who had the highest belief in their ability actually did worse in grading others for it. Even when faced with correct answers on a test, they were unable to recognize the right answer when they saw it. To the extent that you are incompetent, you are a worse judge of incompetence in other people. We found that students who had done worse on the test itself gave more inaccurate grades to other students. Along with this is a sociologist in Germany, Mato Nagel, who put forward a theory based on computer simulations of an election. He put forth a mathematical formula grading the fictional politicians on a bell curve. Some politicians were good and some were bad. The simulation showed that during the fictional elections, voters had no ability to determine who had the best leadership skills. In those simulated elections, people only selected candidates with leadership skills slightly better than their own. What Nagel concluded was that democracies have a very limited ability to elect the best leaders. His conclusion was that democracy is better than a dictatorship because they effectively prevent lower than average candidates from becoming leaders. I am highly suspicious of this work. I think the entire series of studies are completely flawed. We don't really have a reference by which to judge who is supposedly a good leader and who is supposedly a bad leader. Even more flawed is doing this with the "what's funny" section. People who thought they had a good sense of humor didn't have it when tested. Tests said they didn't know what funny was. Exactly how do you judge what is funny? Humor, or what a person finds humorous, is possibly the most subjective opinion a person can have. There are no facts when it comes to what is funny. How exactly did this study decide who is a good leader? What makes a leader good? George Bush is on record as being the worst president of the U.S. since Nixon. But what exactly made George Bush a bad leader? In my opinion, he did everything he was supposed to do. He privatized as much as possible, removed as much government regulation as possible, and gave the financial sector a free hand to do whatever they wanted. This is what he intended to do. This is what a lot of people voted for him to do. I think he's one of the worst leaders. Others would disagree. He would put through free market reforms by eliminating restrictions. Others would say he did a good job of protecting the country after 9/11. It's all completely subjective. I say if you're voting for Ron Paul, you're voting for the destruction of America. The privatization of industry, the removal of government regulation, all these things are the smart thing to do in the eyes of a libertarian. I would absolutely disagree. Such policies would absolutely destroy the country. Immediately drop the quality of life, environmental devastation would take place, and society would revert to a new version of feudalism. I would absolutely advocate the opposite. Collectivize production, plan the economy based on increasing living standards, and focus on things that people need rather than profit-making. A libertarian would say that this is wrong. It's a matter of objectives. How do you decide for a test without being biased? What is a good leader? Because of this, I think the entire study is totally flawed. People have different ideas of what is better. It's not like math where you have a definite right or wrong. It's not a horse race where one horse is faster than another and people just choose the slower ones. I don't trust these studies at all. However, the study does make a very good point when it comes to people not having knowledge in a particular field, not being able to recognize a politician with false knowledge or a bad policy in that same field. Now, this is absolutely true, and I don't think anyone needs a study to tell them that. For example, Joe the plumber is running for congressional office. He was on CNN, and he was asked what he thought qualified him for the job.
And what do you think, or how do you think that qualifies you to run for Congress? What qualifies me, one, I'm an American citizen. Two, I'm very much involved in the process of what's going on. I guess my question would be is what qualifies the current politicians who are killing our country, Republicans and Democrats alike? I'm sorry, it just seems like a silly...
Oh, well, no. I mean, you're running for Congress, so people would want to know what your qualifications are, your breadth of experience in order to lead.
Oh, breadth of experience is that, I've worked all my life. I mean, see these hands right here? There's calluses on them. I've worked the last 25 years having to make results every day to feed my family, pay my bills. Politicians, they live off the backs of broke taxpayers. They constantly take advantage of us. They don't get anything.
It's clear from this clip that he has nothing that would qualify him. He's in a position of complete ignorance. Despite this, many conservative voters will be voting for him for Congress. Now, if you were to test the people who would be voting for them, the test would show they had very little knowledge in this field. Perhaps they are voting for him as a rejection of what the Democrats support, or what they perceive as supporting. I think it's a very good example of this. There is no doubt that the modern Western population lacks a knowledge in specific fields, which restricts their ability to recognize a politician with a good grasp of those fields. This phenomenon is not everywhere. Populations of Western Europe and parts of Asia have a better ability to discern a politician as having a weak knowledge on something or bad policy. The society we live in is programmed to be this way. It's not a coincidence or something that just organically happened. It was planned by the people who are really in control. After all, we have a very reactionary culture. All you have to do is turn on the television to see the garbage that's pumped at people, particularly the youth. There are numerous examples of this: Jersey Shore, Teen Mom, and basically anything on MTV or Fox. Music isn't any better with things like "You a Stupid Ho" and the Insane Clown Posse's disbelief in the scientific principle of magnets. We're fed a pretty ignorant culture and expected to conform to it. Stupidity is seen as a virtue, and being intellectual is shunned as being elitist or just simply being portrayed as the bad guy. This theme runs through comic books, Superman especially. The intelligent supervillain is always the most dangerous one. His opponent, the superhero, is usually a muscular man who is renowned for his strength and simplicity. The mad scientist is another example of the demonization of intelligence and intellectualism. Alex Jones once said that we're being force-fed socialism by elitist intellectuals in our educational institutions, indoctrinating our children. Intellectualism has a history of being persecuted by the religious for being dangerous and subversive. We have a culture that portrays being intelligent as being a person that you can't trust, and thus, as a result, something you shouldn't be. There's very few people in the world who really can't be intellectual. It's all a matter of studying and finding out what way works for you in learning. Different people learn in different ways. The education system we have isn't designed to do that. It's designed to be rigid and dogmatic. Anyone who has taken part in post-secondary education knows that they insist you specialize in something. You have to study a particular field and become an expert. It's limiting ideology doing this. The mind should study many things and be encouraged to do so that we may become knowledgeable in as many fields as possible. Once again, it's clear education is the solution to the problem. The way I see it, this series of studies was intended to promote fascism. It may not have been in the intended purpose of the educational institutions that put them out, but this is pretty biased towards fascism. After all, they say nothing of the conditions that are deliberately caused to create this type of situation. They also don't take into account the different goals of leaders and the people who vote for different objectives. This study is not reliable if you ask me. I think its intended purpose is to promote fascism, a totalitarian government.